Hello and welcome to another episode of Mordred's Community EU4 multiplayer political chat. As always, joined by our co-host, the Martian. Martian, how's it going?
Hello, how you doing?
Doing well. So we'll take a quick look. Great power list here. Um, Not a ton of changes over the past week. I think France moved up a little bit, and Spain as well, passing Ruthenia. Anything else jumping off the page at you?
Nothing, not really. This is about kind of what we expect here. So,
So we'll touch base on the wars from the previous session and then circle back to some of the more ongoing stuff. But session started. Looks like Qing and Ruthenia made a deal. Ruthenia gave up pretty significant amount of land, if I'm not mistaken. Um,
mhm.
what happened there?
um, so basically we kind of got talking, and obviously we had a new Ruthenia player rotate in, and we really wanted to be able to focus on the French Hanover War that we knew was coming soon. And so Alone took an early peace deal with Qing that lost about 100, 130 dev, I think it was.
Okay, so nothing
Um,
too significant. Yeah, pretty low dev in this territory.
Yeah, it's kind of awkward, just obviously because as far as a border goes, it's not a very pleasant border. So,
And it looks like Timurids expanded a little bit this previous session, starting to get the feet under them. In your mind, have Timurids aligned themselves with Qing and Japan, or are they still kind of a wild card in the region?
they've definitely hardcore aligned themselves with Qing and Japan. I mean, first off, they obviously have the in-game alliance, but there's been multiple times where I've been at war with the Timurids purely because Ruthenia was at war with Qing. Even though I've tried to make it pretty clear that I want good relations with Dutch. So he's definitely picked a side on that, and I can't blame him either. Because I mean, in that position, that's kind of a must. So
And then looks like Japan, while participating in the wars, has also continued to expand its little vassal swarm down here. We have Kemer, played by Duel, getting relatively chunky now, and then a few others such as Brunei and Pasai. A little competition coming into the region. Portugal started to expand here. Do you see any competition between Portugal and Japan moving forward, or is Portugal going to be distracted with the ongoing aggression from Great Britain?
it's kind of hard to tell at the moment. I don't see Great Britain trying to go into South America, which buys Portugal a lot of space, but I could see them going for the Ivory Coast, so that way they can better funnel all of the Indian trade through. So it's kind of a tricky spot for Portugal because while expanding in the Spice Islands can be very strong, it's hard to actually get it back to Europe for Spain because of the Zanzibar node being fully controlled by the British and getting collected in that node.
Yeah, it's interesting. Coromandel, after last session, um, had about 80, 90 ducats in it and was a lifeline for Deccan, but as we can see, uh, the British have done their best to destroy the Indian Empire, and Deccan player has actually moved, so will be AI as of right now next session. Were you surprised with how quickly Deccan fell, or was it inevitable given uh, the forces aligned against them?
I I could have seen Takan holding out longer, but at the end of the day, it is against Great Britain. I mean, number one, great power in several different regards, huge colony. I mean, it's just for any one player to stop, it's pretty difficult. And especially after losing that first war right as this new player got in there, it was just kind of doomed from the start.
And then we did have a war between Great Britain, Portugal, and Spain. Um, Great Britain secured a few of the more centers of trade within Zanzibar, and then also a chunk of the Caribbean for their new colonial nation. Any surprises there, or did you view that war as inevitable as well?
I will say it was surprising in a few ways. just, I mean, it happening at all, I wasn't exactly expecting, considering that very long-term alliance between Spain and GB. But I do find it very surprising that GB didn't go for the Ivory Coast trade in addition to the Zanzibar trade, just because obviously, the more nodes that you put that money through, the more money you make. Um, so
Yeah, the Iberians do still have a decent amount of control in the Ivory Coast, compared to, we'll call them the Channel trade partners. It was a little bit surprising to me as well, but I felt with the way Zanzibar was going and the amount of trade that Great Britain was starting to pull out of India, I think the conflict between Portugal and Great Britain was inevitable. It'll be interesting to see if there is a round two and Great Britain decides to consolidate the Ivory Coast. Um, the more land they take in this area, the more exposed they become to Spain and the Spanish land forces. Um, Still tremendous army here in Spain, almost 1,000 force limit themselves, would be a much tougher war than just island hopping around and cutting the Spanish off from mainland Portugal. So it'll be interesting to see what Great Britain and its colonies do moving forward. And then we'll circle back to Europe now. Had an unfortunate loss of another player here, Hanover. France and Hanover went in early on Bavaria. It quickly aligned against them, with yourself in Hungary leveraging the enforced peace mechanic, which Hanover declined. So it was Prussia, Ruthenia, Hungary, and Bavaria versus France and Hanover. Spain got involved at the end, but it looked like the forces of the Eastern Bloc were a little bit too much, given the fact that Ruthenia was able to piece out Qing. Anything you'd like to add from that war?
um, it was a very good war, and it was really interesting just trying to navigate it on our side. Obviously, dealing with being at war with Qing at the start of the session, trying to end that quickly and then move so we could actually focus on the Western Front. Obviously, something that didn't happen as well in the second war here against Bavaria. So,
Yeah, and you mentioned essentially this is just a continuation of the First War, but Spain has been involved from the start this time. Bavaria moved relatively aggressively into Italy, um, so a second or round two was inevitable. Probably even without the move into Italy, a round two was inevitable. But um, interesting to note, Hungary no longer in this war. Seems like you're shifting to try to reinforce here. The French, Spanish forces have started shifting into Prussia to put a little pressure there. Bavaria still has its armies, but largely left to fend for themselves. Um, do you think the inverse of what happened last time, where Ruthenia made a deal with Qing, focused on France? Do you think the inverse is going to happen this time, with Ruthenia making a deal with France and focusing on Qing?
yeah, at this point, that's more or less what's happened. Because Ruthenian got into a second war with Qing that got drawn out a bit too long, and looking at it, I knew that I could fight this war and hold you and Spain back for a while, but I would probably never have the numbers to actually win the war. Um, and so I just tried to seek an early peace with some sort of gain. Got 10,000 ducats out of it, so I was more than happy with that. Um, just because of the fact that I knew at the end of the day there's not going to be a way I was going to win that war, so it's kind of just coming out of it in the least loss for our side as possible. Um, so it's unfortunate for Bavaria, but certainly don't not planning on abandoning Mindboy by any means, like not leaving him to be dead here. It's just that we have to focus on that Qing front before that collapses. So
And something interesting I noticed, Ruthenia, Hungary, Prussia, um, none of you are over force limit. None of you have taken any debt. I- Is there a plan to push a little bit harder, or are you trying to fight the war without too much economic pain?
we're all still trying to grow and keep scaling our countries up. I mean, this session I was at war the whole session, but I increased my force limit by almost 200. And so we're really trying to keep our countries moving forward while still fighting these wars. because it's gonna be really easy to get bogged down and get behind as you fight wars. And so that's why we're trying to we're not like necessarily taking it easy in these wars, but we're not going to go all out and ruin our country.
So, moving forward, it looks like we've got a new alliance between France and Spain. Obviously, depending how Great Britain plays it, that's a big wild card with the balance of power here. Hanover no longer exists, Tuscany no longer exists, so the Eastern Bloc appears to be Prussia, Bavaria, Hungary, Ruthenia. Western Bloc, maybe France and Spain, and then we've got Portugal and Great Britain in the peripheral. How much can be taken here from Bavaria, and how quickly do you think you'll be able to take it back once you've dealt with the Westerners?
I think obviously a lot of it comes down to whether or not Great Britain decides to start getting more hands-on in Europe, or if they continue to focus on India. But I think we're kind of at a point now where it's just going to be kind of endless slugging back and forth between the sides, and I don't think we'll ever see a side truly win from here on out. I think it's going to be similar to what happened this session, where win one war, lose another war, and just kind of go back and forth until the game's over. So,
any plans for you to continue to consolidate any of the AI that remains?
yeah, there's a couple of provinces I still want. Namely, I'm looking to grab Baghdad in the Basra node, as well as Jeddah in the Alexandria node, but mostly just cleaning up borders from here. Obviously, there's not a lot of great lands, but it's the trade that I'm after in the first place with all this. So.
And then, as we approach Saturday's session, what are you most looking forward to?
I'm really looking forward to just continuing our series of wars here. Obviously, it's going to be fun fighting against Qing. I'm also looking forward, though, to see the next iteration of the Bavarian Wars, as well as what Great Britain does. Because obviously a lot is riding on them, and seeing whether or not they attack into Spain or continue eating Deccan, attack into Portugal. There's a lot of fun stuff that will happen. So.
Interesting, just taking a look at the sides here. Yeah, it looks like Ruthenia definitely is going to need the help from Hungary, because you take Deccan out of the equation, obviously it's AI. They're a little bit outmatched on this front, but the Hungarian forces are coming. How quickly do you think you'll be able to push Qing back?
Whenever we've actually been paying attention to that front and fighting it, it's been very quick. It's been very quick, and I mean, once we have all three of us there, we just practically walk through. And it's pretty easy going. Rarely does make it as difficult as possible, and I have to give credit for that. But once we're all there, the numbers advantage is so huge on that front that it's kind of hard to fight against well. So.
This is interesting. You're actually involved through a war with Golden Horde.
I am.
I don't understand the mechanics entirely, but if you get pieced out because Golden Horde gets pieced out, are you then able to come straight back in through Ruthenia, or do you have a truce?
I'm pretty sure there would be a truce, but also that would
take the stability hit to come in.
I couldn't take the stability hit because you can't actually issue a call to arms with the truce going unless it's defensive, which it does not.
Oh, interesting.
I will say it would be. I mean, for one, I didn't intend on entering the war in this manner, but whenever I was at war with you, rarely did that just to try and take the defender of faith from me and be generally annoying. And I kind of just accepted out of spite as well. So, I mean, it would be interesting to try and separate piece me, but considering where the Great Horde's capital is, it'd probably be kind of hard to actually pull off.
Yeah, he might actually have to give up land in a concession. Okay, so yeah, we do have some interesting things to be sorted out. And let's take a look at Timurids and dive in a little bit here. Relatively healthy, quite a bit of money in the bank, a decent vassal swarm with a number of different marches, but they've got the Dakani hordes upon them. How much trouble is Timurids in?
I mean, it's as much as the other players around them want to punish them, I think is what it comes down to. And the biggest reason is because of that max manpower. And if you look at it, it's
It's low.
or yeah, 250,000. I mean, any player and any major player in the game right now could easily just walk in forces, have them get slaughtered, be, losing like, 3 troops for every 1 Timurid troop, but still come out on top because of that force limit, or because of the max manpower. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens to Timurids, because if Great Britain wants to kill them, they're dead. And so there's just it's tricky. Their alliance with Qing, I think, definitely helps stabilize them a lot, though, and it'll keep them safe for a while. So
Yeah, it's actually interesting. Qing manpower has taken a little bit of a hit. Japan, not really, but Ruthenia still tons of manpower, essentially endless. Hungary, basically on max manpower, and Prussia pretty close as well. Um, it's going to be interesting to see how big of a difference that can make, because you can essentially take battle after battle, even if it's not ideal, and just wear Qing down.
And I mean, you saw that in the first Bavarian-French War. I mean, we took every single battle that was offered. We didn't back down from a single battle just because, I mean, manpower is just a fancy number for us. So
Yeah, let's actually take a look here. Where would we find casualties, army losses? Yeah, so Ruthenia and France playing a little bit of trade in here, 1 and 2. Over 6 million Ruthenian lost through attrition, but as you can see, they're still just below max manpower and regenerating at an absurd number. Um, Professionalism still relatively high as well, so it's going to be interesting to see if anyone can take Ruthenia down, or if Ruthenia can just fight forever, essentially.
yeah, and I mean, the real issue, I mean, for our side is that, I mean, we haven't had a war yet where we've felt the need to use professionalism for manpower. I mean, all of our wars we've been staying, near max manpower, and it's just, I mean, there's just a lot of regen, because we have just built our countries for this exact moment. So
Yeah, and let's take a moment and pivot over to Portugal as well. Um, I wanted to see something. He's making one of the highest incomes in the game, I believe, discounting the French number, which is inflated due to a trade deal. He's number 2, right behind Great Britain. Um, yeah, okay. England may come for Portugal again. He's got to build forts. He's got to space them along his coast, basically everywhere. Prevent England from getting a free landing on him. Um, yeah, he's got the income to support it. He should be throwing down level 6 forts wherever he can, deving up to get that extra building slot, and just slamming forts all over his country. It's not awesome terrain, but they're actually, jungle provides some advantage, marsh as well. Um, yeah, he should be
especially
throwing in forts.
if you look at the west, at Potosí, it's literally 4 provinces to take over 30 income of gold off of Portugal, and you look in Peru, once again you got 4 gold mines all in a row. So it's Portugal's in the spot where within the span of one war it could already have tons of its gold income axed. So they definitely need to be wary about getting into a war with anyone because of how quickly they can take hits to their economy. And admittedly, they've got a lot of room to be able to lose money, but still tricky.
Yeah, they should be spending a little more of this money on forts, probably a little bit less on universities. Um, and then the other thing, from a naval perspective, um, you can see Portugal's navy overall. Um, it's going to be hard to compete with Great Britain, but it's worth going over force limit. Um,
Mhm.
it does not cost as much to go over your naval force limit, and you can wear Great Britain down. Obviously, Great Britain hasn't taken naval ideas. They do have the 200 heavies, but Portugal could get to 200 heavies relatively quickly as well.
I will say it's a hard position for Portugal to defend navally just because of how many spaces there are to land in Portugal. I mean, because lots of nations, I mean, you look at like, India, they're going to be landing in Coromandel, right? But with Portugal, I mean, they could land anywhere in South America and be perfectly fine. So that's something that'll be very, very tricky to actually defend from when the moment comes.
Yeah, if I'm Dominic, I'm gonna build forts, force limit buildings, build up to my force limit, go over my naval force limit, and just turn South America into a fortress. It is Great Britain's going to have a little bit of difficulty landing a huge number of troops. They will have an advantage, but as soon as he can finish these two ideas out and just spam troops, he might be able to prevent a landing. It'll
Mhm.
be interesting though.
Yeah. And also, I will say that the Portuguese Marines as the naval doctrine doesn't make much sense if you don't have any Marines built. So um, I'd say pick one or the other. Me personally, I'm partial to not building a single Marine in the game, but there can be benefits to them. So, but you should probably use that bonus or move it to something else. So,
Yep, I agree.
because
And
you will need every little modifier you can get.
yeah, naval combat's tricky. Still something I haven't mastered, but um, every little bit's gonna help. What do we have for? He is Protestant. Oh wow, interesting. Start clicking the button, man. Just lower that bit by bit. Right there, you just gain quite a bit of manpower. Um, yeah, start clicking the button.
And not to mention that once you start clicking the button, you can also toggle the monthly mill power, like revoke it and give it back to them, and start building up your manpower a bit more,
Yep.
um, just to kind of help you out.
Yeah, probably makes sense to pull away some of these benefits as well.
And definitely build up to force limit because you definitely have the economy for it. You could build so many troops now.
Yep.
So
Yeah. Best of luck to you, Portugal. It's going to be an interesting couple of sessions for you. Any final thoughts?
um, I do want to say it's very fun now to actually have Prussia in the game. But also even more fun to actually see alliances shifting and us actually getting in some the big wars we've been preparing for all game. It's a good time.
Yeah, should be an interesting session. Looking forward to it. Thanks for taking the time.